Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Davis with Alicia Davis HR Consulting, and this video is going to be my 10 best tips for passing the PHR California. And I made a video last year in 2023 about passing the PHR California, and although many of the tips are the same, I have had quite a few students passing the PHR California, and I just decided to share a couple of my updated tips based on what's really been helping my students pass and what's been working. So I thought it would be a good time, still pretty early in the year, for those of you who want to make it a goal of yours to take this credential exam. It's totally doable. Excuse my crazy hair. It's totally doable, and I want to impart this kind of information on you to let you know that passing the exam is something you can do with a good, solid study plan and the right information. It's something that you can achieve this year. So if you see me looking away from the screen, that is because I have my laptop behind me behind the frame, and I'm looking at my little tip guide, which is a PDF that I will put the link for in this somewhere in the video, or somewhere, in the description box here, so that you can go on my website and download it if you so please. It is just going to be a free printable PDF that you can look at and use to your desire if you want. And also, I am going to apologize because my hair is very annoying, and I'm going to be messing with it, and it's in my face, and it's annoying. We will not let that distract us from getting these good tips. I do teach a 2-day PHR California boot camp, and I have a 98% pass rate for people who take my class. And that's kind of where I kind of have been fine-tuning these tips. However, these tips will work for you if you are studying on your own, if you have bought materials or books or whatever, or you're taking a class through someone else. These tips will work just fine to help you as well. They're just tips that I think are very helpful and crucial to passing the exam. So they will work for anyone and everyone. So I hope that they are how you find them to be helpful. All right. So my first tip is you need to know the thresholds. The thresholds are, and when I say thresholds, what I mean by that is how many employees you need to comply with a particular law or act. So, for example, in California, you need to have at least 5 employees before you have to comply with the CFRA, California Family Rights Act. You need, of course, I'm not going to think of another one while I'm here on video, but it refers to how many employees before an organization has to start complying with a particular law. So like for, I don't know, I'm going to use the easy one. Disability insurance is 1 or more employee. Having workers' comp insurance, if you have 1 employee, you have to have workers' comp insurance. If you have 1 employee, you have to comply with unemployment, giving unemployment. I mean, it's the thresholds refers to how many employees before you need to comply. So a good way to learn the employment thresholds is, if you don't already purchase this and you do human resources in California, I live by this. It's I'm not a YouTuber, guys. HR Quick Guide. It's probably going to be flipped backwards, but it's the HR Quick Guide that you get from Cal Chambers. This is a 2024 edition. I get it every year because the labor laws change every year, right? And even if it's a little change, it's a big deal in California, so I buy it every year. It's about 70 or 80 bucks. And it tells you, there's a whole section on all of the laws and how many employees before you have to comply with those laws. So when you hear me refer to the thresholds, this is what I'm talking about. So it's a chart, and it tells you which labor laws you have to comply with based on how many employees are in your organization. So you have to know these by heart in order to pass for pass the PHR California. And they're not going to just simply say, how many employees do you need to comply with this labor law? It's usually wrapped in an exam question. So in order to pass, you really need to know these in your mind. Okay. Let me see what's another one. So for example, school activities leave. How many employees, guys? 25 to comply with this law. So mandatory sexual harassment, you need to have it. When you have 5 employees, you have to comply with this labor law. So that's one of my biggest tips, and it's one that I really hit home with my students who are studying for the PHR California, is really know those. Like, before you even start worrying about studying anything else, make sure you know the thresholds. Number 2 is, don't approach the way you study for the exam or when you're actually taking the exam the same way you do your job or you do work. So what I mean by that is, no one's going to want to hear this, but sometimes in HR, we don't do things to the letter of the law. I hate to say it, but we are saying, that's not our company policy. We may do things by the suggestion of our labor attorney, or our boss may say, oh, we don't really have to do it like that. When you are taking the exam, when you're studying the exam, you really need to do it exactly the way it's written in the law. So don't think about like your company policy. Don't think about, oh, we've done it like this for years. Oh, the law is wrong. No, the law is not wrong. We're probably kind of bending the law or working around the law the way we are doing things at work. So don't think about the exam and don't test on the exam the way you do things at work. Think about the exam the way it's written in the law. Follow the law to the T when you're studying for the exam and when you are taking the exam. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you drop me an email and I will explain deeper, because maybe I'm not doing a good job explaining it now. But as much as we like to think we are HR and we do everything by the book, when I was studying for all my exams, and I have the SHRM CP, SHRM SCP, SPHR, PHR, PHR California, I was like, oh, we don't do that at work. Oh, we're doing this a different way. And we don't always do things perfectly by these books. We, do them a little bit different. So don't do that. When you're taking the exam, don't think about how you do things at work. Think about how they want you to do it by the book. Okay? I hope that makes sense, because that's going to help you pass. Don't think about your company policy. Think about how HRCI, the governing body of this exam, how they want you to do things. Okay? Hope that made sense. Number 3 is, when you're studying for these exams, you'll find all kinds of materials. You'll be Googling, and you'll find Quizlet exams. You'll find, other sources online. Be very careful to only study credible sources, because a lot of these little different resources are not accurate. And you can find yourself studying something that's either like a labor law book that's a year or 2 old. It's not going to work for California, right? Our labor laws change every single year. Don't look at something a year or 2 old and think you're going to have it right. You're not, because it changes. Minimum wage changes every year. Things change every year. So make sure you only use up-to-date information. It's not like the PHR, the regular PHR or SHRM exam, where you might be able to get away with using older material. You're going to want to use credible sources, up-to-date material. Don't use old stuff. Be careful with online quizzes and things you find. You want to make sure things come from credible sources. That's all I'm going to say on that. Know the penalties or fines when you violate a labor law. So when you violate a labor law in California, probably in any state, but not probably, when you violate a labor law, there is typically a fine, right? What is the fine for that? What is the fine when you violate any labor law? What is the fine when you, for example, don't make a lactation accommodation for a nursing parent? You want to know what the fines are for violating labor laws, because you may see that as an exam question. That's really important. So when you're reading through things like in the Cal Chambers book, if you use this, or if you purchase materials from PHR-CA, or if you are using another vendor's information, or if you take a class from me. If you take a class from me, I stress the fines. If you take a class from anyone else, I'm assuming that they stress the fines. You want to make sure you pay attention to, oh, they're talking about a fine. Let me pay attention to what that fine is. The fines are important. Know the enforcement agencies and what laws they enforce. So what does DLSC do? Department of, I never know what the acronyms stand for. I swear I've passed the exam, but DLSC, Department of Labor Standards Enforcement, pretty sure that's it. EDD, what do they do? LWDA, what do they do and what do they enforce? You really want to know who all these different enforcement agencies are and what do they enforce. You know, it's even good. My hair is crazy, you guys. It's even good to know to go on those websites. When I was studying for PHR California, I went on EDD's website, familiarized myself. Even if you think you know what they do, and that's my heater if you hear another noise. Even if you think you know what they do, it's not a bad idea to go on their websites and familiarize yourself with what these different agencies do. It's a great idea, in fact. It's a smart idea. Know what these enforcement agencies do. Know the laws about minors and work permits and really understand those, because that's an important part of the exam. You want to know, you know, the ages and the hours they're allowed to work and who needs a work permit, who doesn't need a work permit, that kind of fun stuff. Pay attention to, like, if fines and calculations and things like that, are they done on business days or are they done on calendar days? So, like, for example, penalty pay. Is penalty pay calculated on calendar day or is it calculated on business day? That's important to know. You want to think about gender expression. That's something that you need to know in California. I was reading an article about this recently. You want to know all the terminology around it. Knowing the different leaves. California has a lot of different leaves, and I'm sure you've seen in 2024 they have added a new leave type for it's not bereavement leave. Oh my goodness, what is it called? There is a new leave type in California in 2024, and I cannot. Oh, reproductive leave loss. So, and the thresholds in California for different leaves are lower than on the federal level in most cases. So you want to know the leaves in California and what the threshold is for those leaves, what the qualifications are for those leaves. The leaves are very important. So you want to understand all the different leave laws. Understanding the contractors, that's important. So those are my 10 new tips for taking the PHR California. Here are some bonuses on how to study, because I think that how you study for any of these exams, not just the PHR California, because I help students with the SPHR and the PHR as well. PHR California is my specialty. I love that exam. I get excited about teaching that exam, but I also have a lot of students who ask for help with the PHR and the SPHR. And you guys, it all comes down to one thing. It's just about how you study. It's not so much about what materials and what class you take, and everyone spends so much time on that. And don't get me wrong, I understand that is important, but nothing is more important than how you study. It blows my mind that people don't, come up with a master plan about how they're going to study. So what I will say about that is before you even embark on, you know, registering for the exam and making the decision on taking the exam, you need to sit down and think, how much time do I have to dedicate to this exam? Do I have an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week? How many months am I going to dedicate? Think about time you have to devote to this exam, because it is a commitment. And people oftentimes will pay all this money for the exam or pay all this money for a test, and then they're not committed to the study piece. And if you're not committed to the study piece, it's just a waste of money. So you have to be prepared to study for this exam. It is a lot of information, a lot of memorizing and analyzing, and you really have to be prepared and committed to doing that. So how you study is almost more important than who you go to study. That's probably an overstatement, but how you study is very, very, very important. So come up with a time, you know, how much time, is it a good time? If you're moving and you're sick, you just got promoted and you have all these other things going on, wait until it's a better time in your life. But come up with a study plan, know how much time you have to devote each week, write it down. You know, it's all about discipline and consistency. Have a consistent time frame that you're able to study and dedicate to it every week. Know how you learn best. Do you learn best by going to a class? Do you learn best with flashcards? Do you learn best with recorded materials? How do you learn best? And really come up with a strategy of how you learn best. When I work with my students, I make them engage their brain in many different ways. So we do a 2-day boot camp, and then with the 2-day boot camp, I give them a custom study lesson. My study plans come with video lessons, audio lessons. I make my students do flashcards, and then we have 2 follow-up one-on-one sessions that are separated. One is 2 weeks after our class, so we can see how much studying they've done, and then one is 1 to 2 weeks before they test, so I can assess their readiness, and then I give them a custom study plan and a strategy so that we make 100% sure that they're going to pass the test and that they're ready, and that we can course correct if they're not ready, and we can say, all right, here's what you're going to do to be ready. I say all that to say you have to have a strategy that works for your brain on how to best study, because we all learn differently, right? So you kind of have to know how you learn best and implement that strategy every single week consistently until the day you take the test. And then you kind of have to have a test taking strategy. If you get test anxiety, what are you going to do to combat it? It doesn't make sense to do all this studying and then the day of the test you give it all back because you have test anxiety. So I also work with my students on test anxiety. What are we going to do to mitigate test anxiety? And I have a proprietary method I call STOP that works on test anxiety. And you have to figure out what you can do to mitigate test anxiety. There are very specific things, and I'm not talking about breathing techniques and all those things, but really looking at exam questions and kind of knowing how to use deductive reasoning and looking at the exam question and extracting what you've learned so that you kind of know how to get down to the answer. So I'm really just going off on a tangent today, but I really want everyone to understand that these tests are very doable if, 1, you have some great study tips, 2, you have a great study plan, and 3, you know how to approach the exam and you have great ways to mitigate test anxiety. And if you don't have test anxiety, good for you. Most people do. But if you don't have test anxiety, you have a test taking strategy so that you give yourself the best chance for success in the way you approach the exam. So, with that said, I think I've rambled on for a good 20 minutes, so this video is going way too long. I am going to, again, leave the link to my website if you'd like this free printable with my with my study tips and my bonus tips on how to study, then I will link it below. If you want to take my PHR California Bootcamp, the link will be on my website. If you are taking the PHR or the SPHR and you just want a study coach, I don't teach a full-on class. I do like a 2-hour master class to kind of help you prep for that. And I do, one-on-one study sessions for just about all the HRCI exams. I'm happy to help with that as well. Or just check in, ask me questions. I love to talk about the exams. I don't know why I get excited about it. I love all things HR, so I am always happy to help. With that said, hope everyone is having a great day and happy studying for all of those of you who are studying. All right, my website is aliciadavishrconsulting.com, and yeah, drop me a note and I will always respond. Have a good day. Thank you.